Hi, Paul. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure to have you on. Really excited to talk to you about a couple of key topics: recruitment and sort of the land-based industry in the UK, which are specialisms of yours. And obviously, you've written a few articles for us in the Gambling Insider magazine, so it's great to have you on the GI Huddle for the first time.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think that to start off with, it'd be great, sort of by way of intro, if you could tell our listeners, those who are familiar, who maybe aren't as familiar with you, about kind of your industry experience and your career in gaming so far.
Sure. I mean, I've been doing it as long as I've been legally allowed to. I started out at 18 in betting shops, went to college, and then loved the idea of betting, gaming, casinos. So I became a dealer coming out of university, and I've been in it ever since, working full-time in operations and at Grosvenor's head office for a number of years. Went self-employed 14 years ago. Main speciality since then have been opening new casinos. I've done, I think, 11 now, 10 or 11. And then my business partner and I, Stephen Jackson, started GRS Recruitment 8 years ago, and we've been doing that ever since. So it's kind of a twin stream, mostly, or half casino operations, half betting and gaming recruitment.
Yeah, sure. I mean, both from a journalistic point of view, both are really interesting topics. So I'm more than happy to talk recruitment and casinos as well. I think we can start with the recruitment. As you say, you've got a firm set up with your business partner. If we would talk, let's get industry recruitment first. So if we were to kind of sum up the recruitment landscape in gaming at the moment, what would kind of your overall summary be?
It was a mess at the moment. Splitting it into casino staff and staff junior management and senior management. Staff junior management is a nightmare at the moment. As you can imagine, as you'll know, casino staff outside of London certainly get paid broadly minimum living wage, with minor variations regionally. And you've been in a situation where the casinos have been closed for however long they were closed, and a lot of these guys realised there was a different world. Working till 4, 6 in the morning is pretty tough. You get used to it, but even so. And sometimes you're not working with the nicest people. Customers can be a bit volatile when there's money involved. And all of a sudden, after a career of doing that, they had a couple of years off, or a year and a half off. A bunch of them went and did something else completely. So kind of stacking shelves in the supermarket. It's a familiar story now. We used to say, why would you be a dealer when you can earn more or less the same amount in Sainsbury's, and now you can. Sainsbury's had a national pay rise, so a minimum of £10 an hour, and that's higher than entry rate for a couple of the major operators. So staff and junior management is very, very difficult. There's a lot of people left the industry. Brexit hasn't helped because if you're from Eastern Europe and you used to work as a dealer, if you didn't apply for right to remain, you can't come back. So that's another lump that's been taken out. At a senior level, it's perhaps not as difficult. It depends. I mean, when you're looking for people with casino experience, there's only a certain number of those, and a few have left the industry. Some of the operators are trying to bring people in from outside. So, for example, Grosvenor will have their regional operations managers have come from outside the industry. And as far as I can gather, it's been very successful. It's a bit of an old wives' tale that you need to have done 20 years on the tables before you can understand how to run an operation. At that level, casino, hotel, bingo club, bowling alley, broadly the same. You're managing the managers. Certainly, everything in between staff and senior manager is also difficult. From a recruitment standpoint, it's great because people can't find the people they need, and we're in a position to help them. But we can't always do that. If you want 10 dealers in Birmingham, we can't find them. They're just not there. They've left the industry. They don't want to come back. So it's certainly challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my next question was going to be, what are the biggest challenges kind of recruitment companies are facing in gaming at the moment? But I think you outlined a few quite articulately there. I'll rephrase the question kind of based on what you said. On the junior level, basically, how hard of a sell is it, given kind of, as you say, you can maybe pick up just as much at Sainsbury's. But at the senior level, I'm guessing, it's still an attractive proposition for kind of execs and maybe CEOs and people like that.
I think so. Yeah. Certainly it's perceived, offline and online aren't necessarily perceived as that different from people from outside the industry, and online is booming and has been through COVID and beyond. So I think at that level, the skills are more generic, more transferable. If you can be a compliance director for an oil company, you can be a compliance director for a casino company. It's just a different set of rules. So that side of it is relatively easy to navigate. One of the things we are finding, talking about challenges from a recruitment standpoint, is, I think this probably goes across all sectors, not just gaming. It's been a buyer's market for skills for a long time. There've been more people than senior vacancies. Now, it's getting more difficult to find people. There are some recruitment practices that have stayed the same and haven't really updated, and one of them is speed and nimbleness, and it goes at both levels. At staff level, if you get someone who's interested in being a dealer, you better talk to them within a day, and you better have them in for a table test and an interview and a meet and greet within 3 days. So if you don't, they're gone. They get a job in the local pub or wherever it might be, and you've missed your chance. And I think the same holds true to a certain extent at a senior level. It doesn't necessarily, it's not a matter of days, but definitely a matter of weeks. We had a case just recently, about 3 weeks ago, where one of the UK offline operators was looking for a mid to senior level marketing person. We spent a ton of time trying to find them the right person, which wasn't easy, because there's a lot of jobs out there and not many great people. Found someone, they interviewed them, and about 4 weeks later, they said they would like to talk to them again. Way too late. They were long gone. People don't stay on the market for long in a market as hot as this one. So I think it's challenging on the basis that it's frustrating when perhaps employers haven't adjusted from the days when they would just shout, "We need this," and they get a ton of people applying and they pick the best one, to where we are now, where you've got to work a lot harder and people aren't going to wait. Why would you wait for one job when there's 3 others that look just as good who've made you an offer?
Yeah, I think that's I guess that's a key point to note for any kind of recruiters, any gaming companies listening. But I think to flip it maybe on the candidate side, if there's a CEO role, which kind of, it's a good role in the industry, people want it, it's in demand, the role itself. If you're a candidate looking to land take that next step into leadership, what should you be doing to kind of make sure that an operator or be it a supplier picks you?
Well, anyone at that level will already know what I'm about to say, which is networking. It's the number of jobs that we would love to have a chance to fill, that get filled because it'll be someone they already know. It's all about. I'm not suggesting that there's anything unethical going on, but sure, if you're already known to a prospective employer, then you've got a massive edge. And I think that my partner and I, we try and be as well connected as possible. I've worked in the business for a long time. Steve's been recruiting for 15 to 20 years in the business. He's the best connected man in gaming, I always like to say, and that's what makes a huge difference. On a specific note, I think even at the very senior levels, an enhanced awareness of how important compliance is these days. If you've never worked in a strictly or tightly regulated industry, then I think that's something that will be an issue. And if nothing else, you need to demonstrate an awareness of how restrictive that can be, particularly in the UK, and it's obviously getting worse, likewise online and internationally. The scale of fines that are being levied at the moment, and there's new ones out every day, including today, and the threat to personal licenses and to livelihoods and to businesses is acute enough that I think employees need to be comfortable that you might not know the law, but you need to know that abiding by the law is important. There is no more seat of the pants stuff, or if there is, the company's going to go down, and that's not a risk people are prepared to take.
Yeah, absolutely. As we've already kind of discussed, plenty to sort of unpack with regards to recruitment, and I think your upcoming article for our next issue does touch on the kind of some of the things we talked about, but certainly other issues in recruitment. Another speciality of yours, as we've already said, is kind of the land-based, the casino sector in the UK. I'd like to move on to that one now, and then maybe we'll come back to recruitment a little bit later if needs be. But obviously, casinos, an interesting time. A lot of them were, well, not actually interesting. Sorry, that's a bad word. Obviously, during the pandemic, it was a terrible time for casinos. But I guess now it's a little more interesting in that they're back up and running. Generally, what's kind of the UK sector saying at the moment? What do you think of kind of performance and operations right now?
Obviously, it's pretty dynamic with the last restrictions being lifted a matter of days ago. I think the general consensus is, in the first reopening, when they were allowed to reopen the first time, it was a little bit better than people expected. They thought it was going to be a wasteland and that people would be scared to come in. I think it's fair to say, if you divide the clientele into people who come in to play and people who come in for a pure, a social experience, which traditionally operators have done in terms of how they measure their business, the leisure customers, the non-heavy spenders, probably have been a bit more reticent to come back, or possibly they've preferred to go back to just going to the pub and restaurants and cinema and that kind of thing, the kind of stuff they missed, with casinos being an occasional thing. I think the gamblers, by which I'm not necessarily talking about enormous sums of money, I'm talking about anything from £50 a visit upwards outside of London, they've been quicker to come back, I think, because they really like gambling. They go to casinos because they want to gamble, as opposed to the leisure players who go in because they want to try something different. I think they've come back. So it's the picture I'm getting generally is that attendance is a bit lower, but spends are a little bit higher, which is a theme that's been pushed a little bit by at least one of the major operators as well, who've been kind of jacking up the minimums and accepting the fact that that's going to exclude some players. I think the landscape as a whole in casinos has been clearly it's been affected by COVID, but the thought process has as well. And I think operators now are starting to look very carefully at what kind of customers they want, particularly on tables. I mean, traditionally, or perhaps in the collective consciousness, casinos are tables and they have slots and electronic roulette in the background. I think that's really changing now. It's in the operator's interest to change that, because tables are incredibly expensive to run. But I think perhaps the early restrictions, when there were only 3 people per card table and 4 people per roulette table, from a social distancing point of view, have crystallized that in a few people's minds that actually, if you focus your attention on the people who play more heavily and particularly play faster or essentially lose faster, then it's more profitable. And especially in a world when you're getting pinched as well because you don't have any staff, because they've left the industry, and because at the time they were out with COVID or with close contacts, that kind of thing. If your gaming staff are cut in half and the number of people you can have per table is cut as well because of restrictions, then you've got to focus on the people who spend. And I think that going through that process has made operators realise what's possible, that actually a table full of what we would kind of call Saturday night players who've got 50 quid each and they want 2-3 hours entertainment out of it, it's just not enough. If you've got limited staff, you can deploy those staff better elsewhere. So whether you go really kind of savage and push the minimums up such that they just can't play, they can't afford to play and they don't want to play, and then in theory force them to go and play on the electronic games, whether you pitch it as directly as that, or whether you just say increase the price to make it more expensive to play because you've got to, because you don't have enough staff, it amounts to the same thing. I think there'll come a day, and I think this process is ongoing. It'll push through as we recover from COVID. There'll come a day when table games really just are too expensive for the average person to play. And I think from an operator's point of view, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, so what you've described here, is that essentially a case of fewer players, but overall the revenue has actually increased? Because, for example, we were at the Hippodrome in December, and not to say if it's a good or bad thing, but just objectively, if you were betting on black or red, it was minimum £50 bet, which is what you're kind of describing there.
Yeah, I think we're a little way away from fewer players but more revenue overall. But in terms of just on the basis that we haven't recovered properly from COVID. In London, no one's travelling into, or very few people are travelling into London. The traditional Middle to Far East business has been destroyed by the travel restrictions. So we're not quite at the stage where revenues increase despite admissions falling, or despite there being fewer gamers. But it's a step on that direction. And then that judgment can only really be made once we're back to the kind of staffing levels that we're at before, which I don't even know if we'll get there. And from an operator's perspective, if you can make broadly the same revenue on tables with 70% of the staff, you're a mile ahead. And then ideally the revenue that you've lost off the tables, go play on the electronic games. If the gambling review leads to more slots, then you've got more playing position for them. I think people are just being more mindful of speed of loss, which sounds like a scary term, problem gambling wise, but I mean it purely in the sense that if I like a punt in the casino, I'm probably worth 100 quid over 2 hours. So if I'm, obviously I'll win occasionally, but people who are willing to lose their money a little slower, it's going to get to the stage where they just can't afford to accommodate them on tables.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think I was going to ask, where does land-based kind of gaming go from here in the UK? I mean, how popular are casinos overall? But what you said there, I think maybe suggests we can't answer that directly. There's kind of different compartments to it. But something based on what you've said there, does that mean casinos could actually inadvertently, because of COVID, become a little bit more efficient, maybe in the long term?
I think so. I think that it's been an accidental lesson, or inadvertent, as you say. And I think there's other elements as to where we're going as well. One thing that I'm always conscious of is I started out as a dealer in 1995, and I was acutely aware that the plan was to present the casino as a exciting, almost not dangerous, but edgy nighttime proposition. If you're in a casino, it was exciting. There was things going on, and the whole idea is to present the face of something a bit different. In the late 90s, early 2000s, the operators went towards trying to make it more open and welcoming and much more brightly lit. disaster in terms of results. People still want that edginess, and if it looks like an operating theatre, there's no edge to it. Now, design-wise, it's gone back to, well, not to the smoky, horrible, low-ceiling places, but still quite an edgy atmosphere. I do wonder, given how heavy the pressure is on staff, not just on gaming staff, but on staff at every level, and how the pressure's been on costs, I wonder if it's going to be possible to keep the kind of mystique element that has traditionally been what casinos have been all about. And the more you aim at the mass market, which everyone wants to do, everyone wants to bring in new players, I think it's probably fair to say the number of serious casino players that are being developed is lower than the number of casino players who are being pushed out either by AML regulations or safer gambling regulations, or just don't find it as interesting anymore. And that's I do wonder where that's going. Can we bring in enough people who are going to play enough and fast enough to justify having a casino operation? The alternative to which is it ends up very electronic, slots, electronic roulettes, and just a handful of tables. And then do you lose the thing that makes a casino a casino? There are arcades on every street corner already. We all saw what happens with betting shops when they had 4 fixed odds betting terminals. Yeah. If that is the atmosphere you end up creating in a casino, where's your USP? What are you offering that other people aren't? And that's going to be interesting to see how that shapes out.
Yeah, definitely plenty of food for thought when it comes to striking that balance. A couple of sort of final questions for you. First one is, can you tell us a little bit about the background there? You've got Michael Vaughan cricket.
It took a while to figure out where it's from. It arrived. My wife bought it for me at a charity dinner. I think there might have been champagne involved. It's a Michael Vaughan signed cricket shirt, but it wasn't obvious which competition it was from. I consulted some sports fan friends. It turns out it's from some weird T20 competition in the US of all places. Oh. You can't quite see it in frame. It's bizarre. It's a cricket shirt from I think a 2010-ish cricket tournament with a bat next to it that's about 40 or probably about 100 years old. So my wife didn't know what she was getting when she got it, but it looked like a good Christmas present. So it's now my backdrop.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, definitely a nice background, an interesting one. Final question from me is, if we kind of go back to, I guess, the recruitment, but also the LandBased overall, really, what are your kind of final thoughts? Do you have any kind of big kind of predictions, or just themes and thoughts on 2022 coming up? Because we just entered February. We still got the whole year ahead.
Well, I mean, COVID recovery is obviously a big part of the theme. I'm looking forward to, I mean, as you'll know, the UK offline industry is dominated by 2 groups, and they seem to be going slightly divergent directions. One is very much focused on premium pricing, the table element. The other seems to be more premium pricing and the electronic roulette element. They're both desperate to see what the gambling review holds. More machines per casino would be a huge difference maker. The ability to offer RNG games is very much at the forefront of everyone's minds, because that then enhances your electronic offer. But it seems clear that everybody is going to have to, if not push, then pull people from tables onto electronics. And then is there a tipping point at which it becomes too electronic, not personal enough, loses the edge, and then everyone says to themselves, what am I getting here that I wouldn't get at an arcade or online or in a bingo club? And I think I don't know if that line exists, but I think if we get there, we'll get there quickly, and we'll drip over the cliff edge before we realise it. I think that would be something that would scare me. But these operators know what they're doing. They see figures that I don't, perhaps. But certainly that's something I'm looking forward to seeing. If they're successful in pushing people onto electronic games in volume and keeping the industry alive. So I'm very conscious. You compare casinos to bingo. The bingo industry has been singing the same song for a long time. That, well, we're going to bring new players into the industry. We're going to bring younger players. We're going to make it more gender balanced. And as far as I'm aware, I'm not a bingo expert. As far as I'm aware, judging by the number of clubs in operation, that hasn't happened. And you struggle to see a future for bingo. Casinos have got a few more years than bingo have, even in the worst case. But I'd hate to think that in 20 years' time, someone will be having this conversation saying, why didn't they see it coming?
Yeah, absolutely. Plenty to think about. Plenty, I'm sure we'll ponder perhaps in future interviews, but definitely in your columns in our magazine. But for now, thanks very much for your analysis. Really enjoyed speaking about two key issues, really, especially in the UK sector. And yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Tim. That's great.